Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me once again. I was here last year. I'm so happy to be here this year. The weather is perfect, although I would say that it was 38 degrees in Greece, and for me it's much pleasant here because it's the opposite from the previous speaker that was really coming from a cold country. So I'm so glad to see you all. I'm always glad to see young people working in the area of obesity, and I must honestly say that I was impressed from your presentations before, and good luck to whatever you're doing. And hopefully afterwards we're going to have a workshop, and especially for the ones that you are more interested in the area of nutrition and dietetics, we have the chance to exchange some ideas. Because now I'm going to give a presentation, but after lunch it's going to be a workshop, a working group. So I want it to be, I want your views and your ideas in this working group. So I'm going, the title of my presentation, I would say it's a huge subject, Nutrition Intervention to Treat Obesity-Related Complications. And I would start, of course, from Hippocrates, since I'm Greek, and I would say that let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. What about obesity? We do know that obesity is a disease. Obesity is an epidemic. And facts about obesity and overweight from the WHO global records, more than 1.9 billion adults 18 years or older are overweight, and of these over 600 million are obese. And the worldwide prevalence of obesity more than doubled between 1980 and 2014. And what about children? We do know, of course, the epidemic in adults, but unfortunately we have exactly the same problem for children. And this is from the COSI studies, the WHO European Childhood Obesity Surveillance Initiative. We are now in the third round. We started in 2007 with 7 countries. In 2016, we're 27 countries taking part in this, so you understand how childhood obesity problem, how important it is for all the countries to face it. And what is the situation for the children, similar as in the adults, who have a very high prevalence of childhood obesity in all European countries. You see all the European countries here. I think this is the... Do you know which one is the pointer? This one? No? Okay, this one. Okay, thank you. So you can see that most of the countries, they have a percentage of more than 20% of childhood obesity, overweight and obesity, and you can see that the highest prevalence is in the South Europe. Unfortunately, the Mediterranean countries, although it shouldn't be really like that, it should be the opposite, but unfortunately the Mediterranean countries, and we can discuss it later, have the highest prevalence of childhood obesity. So we have the highest prevalence in the Mediterranean countries, followed by, let's say, Middle Europe, and Northern Europe. And the picture is a little different in Eastern European countries. Although we have a lower prevalence compared to the Southern European countries, we have a very sharp increase in the prevalence in these countries. And of course the problem, as you can see here, is universal, and I'm showing this is from a Chinese obesity camp. And the reason I'm showing this is because when I first started teaching obesity in my students, I kept on saying that we have China as an example of good nutrition, an example of a very low percentage of obesity. And see what happened within 10 years. They skyrocketed from 5%, I would say not within, I would say within a generation, but the last 10 years we have a very sharp increase. So we have an increase in one generation from 5% to 20% of overweight and obesity in this country. So it's, I would say, a universal problem. What about obesity-related health consequences? We heard this morning about the relationship between raised BMI, which is a major risk factor for cardiovascular diseases. So raised BMI is a major risk factor for all the non-communicable diseases, the NCDs as we call them. So we're talking about cardiometabolic diseases, cardiovascular diseases like coronary heart disease and stroke, of course, are due to dyslipidemia, as we said again this morning, hypertension, and type 2 diabetes mellitus. But also, we have other health consequences like musculoskeletal disorders like osteoarthritis, some type of cancer like endometrial cancer, breast cancer and colon cancer, sleeping apnea, gallstones, infertility. And this is the prevalence of non-communicable disease. I would say the death rate due to non-communicable diseases in different places in the world. And again, as I said about obesity, you can see that we have a high percentage of death rates from non-communicable diseases all over the world. And what do we do about it? What is happening in the world regarding how we face the problem? In 2011, we had the first commitments from the heads of the states and governments in a UN General Assembly. And then, in 2012, the World Health Assembly adopted a global target of a 25% reduction in premature mortality from NCDs by 2025. And then, in 2013, we have the global NCD, the WHO Global NCD Action Plan, 2013 to 2020, including 9 global targets and 25 indicators, and this was reviewed by the UN General Assembly NCD review in 2014. So we do have the Global Action Plan for the prevention and control of the non-communicable diseases, 2013 and 2020, with a vision of a world free of avoidable burden of NCDs. This is the vision. And the goal is to reduce the preventable and avoidable burden of morbidity, mortality, and disability due to NCDs by means of multi-sectoral collaboration. This is very important, the multi-sectoral collaboration, and cooperation at national, regional, and global level. And I'm going to concentrate to the ones that, of all these goals that we want to talk today, and I think are more related to my subject, diabetes and obesity, 0% increase. Very optimistic, and unfortunately we're not going to have succeeded by 2025, unfortunately. Raised blood pressure, 25% reduction. Salt and sodium intake, 30% reductions. A lot of work carried out now in Europe regarding salt reduction. Physical inactivity, 10% reduction. And premature mortality from NCDs, 25% reduction. And tobacco-free Pacific. So in the area of childhood obesity, I try to say a few things about policy, and then we'll go on with the nutritional guidelines. So we have, you can see some, let's say, guidelines regarding obesity and NCDs in general. But we also have specific actions for specific age groups. For example, we have a new action plan on childhood obesity, 2014-2020. And this action plan, there are 9 goals to support a healthy start in life. We heard this morning about the importance of the mother, of the nutrition of the mother regarding childhood obesity, and the beginning of life with breastfeeding. That is very important, at least up to 6 months. So support a healthy start in life, halting the rise in overweight and obesity in children and young people by 2020, promote healthier environments, especially in schools and preschools, make the healthy option the easier option. This is something I like a lot because it is very related to what we're trying to do in the nutrition area, to give options that are healthier in a very obesogenic environment, to restrict marketing and advertising to children, to inform and empower families, to encourage physical activity, to monitor and evaluate all the time, which is very important, and to increase research in the area of childhood obesity. And we have a new program, and you can go and see the website. I think it's important to go to www.jampa.eu. This is a new joint action on nutrition and physical activity. We had the kickoff meeting in Luxembourg a year ago. We're now after 1 year, and we have I think some good results that we can follow in the website. The program is going to be completed in 2017, so it's a 2-year program. And the purpose of this program is to, first of all, I would say that there are all European countries involved in this program, and is a policy, a political, as you said before, I like the word political program. That means that there are all the ministries of health and education involved. And they try to work together in order to prevent the increase, as we say, in childhood obesity in Europe, to halt the increase. So what is happening in this program? There are different work packages. For example, there's a work package on reformulation, which is very interesting. There is a work package on the economic cost of childhood obesity to show to the governments how important it is to work on childhood obesity because the cost is very high. So we're trying to get information from all the countries in order to be able to calculate the cost. There is a very good work package on programs, the best practice, as we call it, the best practice, the best programs we have in Europe, in kindergartens, in schools, primary schools, high schools, regarding nutrition. What is the best practice in Europe? How we can say this program, to evaluate it and say this is the best. Also, all the countries, this is an example what you have to do for childhood obesity regarding preschool and school children. And there is also another very good program that looks again on things that have to do with early life, as we call it, breastfeeding and food practices in very young children. So all these people together from all over Europe, all the European countries are involved, are trying to work on this joint action. So we are hoping we're going to have some good results, and we are hoping we're going to influence as much as possible in the area of halving the increase in childhood obesity. So, trying to cover everything, what about cardiometabolic diseases? I'm sure we all understood the relationship between BMI and heart health. And we do have some good work regarding the benefits of weight loss to heart health, and I will try to summarize some of these, let's say, evidence-based studies. We do talk about a moderate weight loss of 5 to 10%, and if we want to make that in kilograms, we would say for a decrease in 5 to 10 kilograms. So what happens if we decrease our body weight by, let's say, 10 kilograms? We have a decrease in blood pressure, and we can see the decrease here. In both diastolic and systolic blood pressure, we have a decrease in diabetes. Especially, it is very important to look at this group, what we call the pre-diabetes group, that we have a very important decrease if these people lose weight. We have a decrease in total cholesterol levels, we have a decrease in LDL cholesterol, we have a decrease in triglycerides, and we have a very small, I would say, small increase in HDL cholesterol. And of course, there are very many guidelines from different bodies. American guidelines, European guidelines. Since we are in Europe, I would prefer to talk about the European guidelines. And these are the 2016 European guidelines on cardiovascular disease prevention in clinical practice. And you can see this is a joint task force of the European Society of Cardiology and other societies on cardiovascular disease prevention in clinical practice. So we do have representatives of 10 different societies. And what is the conclusion from these guidelines? What is a cardioprotective diet? It's a diet that have no more than 10% of saturated fatty acids, and these are replaced by polyunsaturated fatty acids. A lot of emphasis has been given the last years on trans fatty acids, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with this. And we do know that trans fatty acids have to be as little as possible. We would say preferably no intake of trans fatty acid, if this is possible. And this is mainly, and we do all know that we take a lot of trans fatty acids from processed foods. So, what do we say? What is our advice? As little as possible of processed foods, especially the ones that contain, of course, trans fatty acids. So, trans fatty acids as little as possible, preferably no intake from processed foods, and less than 1% of total energy intake from national origin. We do give a lot of emphasis the last years on salt intake. There are a lot of initiatives in Europe. I don't know, have one seminar only for that, talking about all the initiatives on salt reductions. A lot of work now carried out in Europe for limiting salt in bread and bread products. And less than 5 grams of salt per day. And as we'll see later on that for hypertension, we talk about less than 3 grams per day. 30 to 45 grams, you will see that we increase. When I started talking about fiber, I was talking about 30 grams. Now you see we always have new data increasing as much as possible the intake of fiber per day, preferably for whole grain products. This is also a lot of emphasis on whole grain products. More than 200 grams of fruit per day, 2 to 3 servings, and more than 200 grams of vegetable per day. And of course, the 5 per day is still something we advise our patients, we give to patients as an advice. Fish, a lot of work on fish, 1 to 2 times per week, and what is important, we give an emphasis of once at least per week should be oily fish. 30 grams of unsalted nuts per day. I would say this is also a pretty new recommendation. Consumption of alcoholic beverages, this is the same as it used to be, I don't know, 10 years ago, should be limited to 2 glasses per day for men and 1 glass per day for women. There are some, I don't know, new presentation, new articles in the literature saying that the least you drink, the best it is. There's a lot of, I would say, there are some investigators that they keep on saying that 1 glass of red wine is good for your health and is cardioprotective, but there are some other findings that they say, oh well, the less you drink, the best it is. But anyway, then I don't think there are more conclusions in this area than what you see in this recommendation. And finally, a lot of work is carried out in Europe now on sugar, sweetened soft drinks, and alcoholic beverages consumption that must be discouraged, mainly the sugar sweetened soft drinks. Cardiovascular disease and unsaturated fats. A recommendation to cut down on fat and eat unsaturated fat rather than saturated. We have a lot of discussion in that in the literature from many years, as you can see here. And we have a lot of work carried out regarding polyunsaturated or monounsaturated fat, and it was a lot of debate for years. We come from the Mediterranean countries, so you would understand that I believe in monounsaturated fatty acids, so I'm the one that say, okay, everything should be olive oil. So, and we do have a lot of work on olive oil, and I would say I will only say a little bit about the oxidative damage. We have some studies in Europe, like the EuroLife study and the virgin olive oil study, that they've shown that olive oil is reducing the markers of oxidative stress. And I will show you another work later on this area. Omega-3 fatty acids. Recommendation, I said, to consume twice a week fish, at least 1 portion of oily fish. A lot of work has been done again in this area. Meta-analysis have shown the potential cardiovascular disease, morbidity and mortality benefit for especially secondary prevention. Keep that. We have more work on secondary. We have more work, sorry. We have more work done on secondary prevention. But we also have some good work, like the DART study and the GC study and the JELLY study, that they've shown that omega-3 fatty acids have a benefit for cardiovascular disease risk reduction. And what is the benefit? What is the benefit of omega-3 fatty acids? Is mainly in improving the lipid profile. And we have some work on blood pressure, but I would say, if you ask me, that most of the evidence-based studies are related with lowering cholesterol mainly and improving the lipid profile. So through that, it affects the cardiovascular, it protects cardiovascular diseases. And if we don't eat fish, there are some other foods that we can use, like rapeseed, canola oil, walnut, flax, soya, linseed oil, ground and crushed linseed, flax, pumpkin seed, and salted nuts, walnuts, peanuts, almond, and some omega-3 enriched foods like eggs. In Greece, for example, we have a lot of, in my place, producing eggs that have been enriched with omega-3 fatty acids, some milk or yogurt. That could be some choices. But of course, the best choice is fish, because there are some studies, again, that have been shown that we have better results if we take omega-3 fatty acids regarding cardiovascular prevention, especially lowering cholesterol, that we have some better results if we get omega-3 fatty acids from fish compared if we get it from either added in different foods or by taking it as a supplement. Okay, so when we're talking about nutrition and cardiometabolic diseases, there are 3 levels we can talk about it. First is nutrients. And here I can go on and on and on and talk about a lot of other nutrients. I'm not covering the area. I'm just trying to give you some ideas of how you're going to look at, by yourself when you go back home, what you have to study. For example, there's a huge literature regarding micronutrients that I'm not going to touch now. That means minerals and vitamins. There is some good work now on vitamin D and its role in protecting cardiovascular diseases. But this is the level of, and then afterwards, when we're going to have the workshop, if you're interested in any of these areas, we can discuss it more. So one level is macro and micronutrients, is the level of nutrients. There is a second level, which is the level of foods. You see, I just tried to touch it, and I said it's different to take the omega-3 fatty acids from fish than taking from a supplement. This is a huge area as well. And to be honest, we don't know a lot. We don't have some good RCTs in these areas. And this is for you to think about it, and since you are the younger generation, to think and do more RCTs in these areas. So one level is nutrients, macro and micronutrients. The other level is foods. So we can find a lot of work in the literature regarding foods. For example, cardiovascular diseases and fruits and vegetables. Recommendation, and I'm sure you all know this recommendation, is very, very many years in the market, 5 a day intake. Because we have dietary polyphenols, we have a lot of other ingredients in fruits and vegetables that are beneficial for the prevention of cardiovascular diseases. For example, we have the SUN study that showed that fruits and vegetable consumption is inversely associated with blood pressure in a Mediterranean population with a high vegetable intake, fat intake. Increase of fruit and vegetable intake have been linked with a lower BMI in another cross-sectional study. This was vegetables and vegetable fat intake. And this is a meta-analysis of 200,000 patients that they showed a 4% relative risk reduction in cardiovascular diseases with each serving of vegetables, and a 7% relative risk reduction in cardiovascular diseases with each daily increase in serving in fruit. So we have work in the literature showing that if we eat more fruits and vegetables, if we increase our consumption, we have, let's say, a better protections against cardiovascular diseases. And there is another meta-analysis that showed a 17% reduction in cardiovascular diseases with 3 to 5 servings of fruit and vegetables as the primary endpoint. And we have the EPIC study, and we get a lot of results from the EPIC study, is the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer. That is, again, with a very big number of people. This particular part of the EPIC study, it was 313,074 patients, and they had a 22% low risk of fatal ischemic heart disease in those consuming 8 portions of fruits and vegetables are compared with 3 portions or less. Another area, another group of foods is the whole grain foods. So fruits and vegetables is an area that have a lot of work in the literature regarding the protection. Again, when we're talking about cardiovascular protection or cardiometabolic protection, we're again talking about preventing hyperlipidemia, hypertension, okay, diabetes or pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. Again, the same results with whole grain foods. I told you before that if you see in the literature, we increase the recommendation for fiber. We started with 25 grams when I first started teaching. We had to 30 grams, and now there are some studies that are talking about 40 and 45 grams of fiber. Again, and again, of course, all fiber is not the same, and you know that the more protective is the soluble fiber. So that's why we added in the recommendation the intake of vegetables, legumes, that is very important, and I'm going to talk a little bit about legumes later on, and nuts. So, diets high in fiber, as whole grains, there's a lot of work done in oats and barley. I could present oats and barley and hypercholesterolemia only that, there is, I don't know, a very big number of studies on the role of barley and oats in reducing blood cholesterol. So eating more, but in general, we have to have some dietary, let's say, guidelines for our patients. So what do we say? You eat more fruits and vegetables, you eat more whole grain. Okay, this is a good message. And it covers a lot what we know from the literature, the evidence-based data. So RCTs have showed beneficial effects on BMI, on waist circumference, and on cholesterol profile in groups that they are eating whole grains and whole oats. And of course, a number of meta-analyses, and one that showed a 21% reduction in cardiovascular diseases. And we also have a number of observational studies. Now you understand the difference. We have the observation studies, we have the RCTs. We are not so happy with some of our results from the observational studies, so we say, okay, but we need more RCTs. But of course, we have some indication from the observational studies, and we have seen a number of observational studies showing that the group of people that they are having a higher intake of whole grains, they have a lower BMI and, of course, a protection from cardiovascular diseases. And again, about whole grain studies, nuts and legumes. What is the recommendation? You saw it before, include 28 to 30 grams of unsalted nuts daily. We're talking about unsalted nuts, we must be very careful with that. And this is something that I said that is a new recommendation. It was not there 15 years ago, but we started having some good studies, including nuts. I will show you the PrettyMed study in a little while that included nuts. So substituting what we're talking about, nuts, walnuts, peanuts, almonds, of other nuts, and you can substitute a serving of carbohydrates or a serving of saturated fats. And it's better to substitute a serving of saturated fats and compared to a serving of whole grains, for example. So in order to have, if you substitute it, you can substitute it for carbohydrates, for example, like sugar type carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, and not like starch. So you either substitute a serving of sugars or saturated fats. So we have a reduction, if we include walnuts, peanuts, almonds, all the other nuts, we have a reduction mainly in blood lipids. We have a reduction in LDL cholesterol, we have a reduction in inflammation and oxidant mediators. And we have some good results on the benefits of nuts on weight loss. Plant stanols and sterols. What are the recommendations? For optimum cholesterol reduction, we need about 2 to 2.5 grams of plant sterol per day. We cannot have, it seems that we don't have any additional benefit if we take more than 3 grams. So this is the level we have to take per day in order to have some results regarding especially lowering cholesterol. And we can have it as a fat spread, or cream cheese, or semi-skimmed milk, or yogurt. And as you know, it's added in different type of foods, the plant sterols and stanols. Now, I said we have 3 levels. One level is macro and micronutrients. The second level is foods. And the third level is dietary patterns. And this is, of course, as you understand, is my favorite. Because I do believe that we don't eat only nutrients and foods, but we do have dietary patterns. And it's very, in my opinion, it's easier to have people understand a dietary pattern, especially if they are used in this dietary pattern. I keep on saying if it is in their genes. And of course, this is also something we can discuss. How can other countries can adapt, for example, the Mediterranean diet? But anyway, let's start saying something about the dietary patterns. And of course, I'm choosing to talk about the Mediterranean diet as the dietary pattern I think that has more studies in the literature compared to other dietary patterns. And this is the Mediterranean diet that I'm sure all of you have seen before, that talks about, in the basis, we have fruits, beans, legumes, nuts, vegetables, then we have olive oil, which is yogurt, fish, poultry, and then we have sweets and red meat on the top a few times per month. This is a few times per week, and this is the daily consumption. And we have regular physical activity as part of it, and wine in moderation in the Mediterranean diet. Wine is mainly red wine, and it's about 1 glass per day, and it's with food. And we have this study in 2013 in the New England Journal of Medicine that showed, I think it was one of the most important studies about the role of Mediterranean diet and decreased death rate. And this site showed that we have a decrease in death rate as we increase our adherence to the Mediterranean diet. It's a Mediterranean diet score that starts from 0 and goes up to 10. And the highest the score, the lowest. As we increase the score, we decrease the death rate. And of course, the Mediterranean diet has, whatever I discussed before, has a number of beneficial foods, that they have a number of beneficial nutrients. So we start from the top. We have the dietary pattern that has specific foods that have specific nutrients. And we can look at each level on the role of these nutrients and foods and the pattern in the health of the people. So we have very, very many studies and a number of good RCTs and cohort studies regarding the role of Mediterranean diet in the reduction of cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. What we have in the Mediterranean diet? Fish, unsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats, whole grains, fruit and vegetable, nuts and legumes. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Mediterranean diet, talking about the PREDIMED study. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the PREDIMED study. It's a pretty recent study. And the reason I'm going to talk about it is to give you some idea how we're working regarding dietary models and dietary patterns and cardiometabolic diseases. This study, it was a multi-center randomized primary prevention trial with 772 people taking part. They were subjects at high risk of cardiovascular disease. They either had type 2 diabetes or they had more than 3 cardiovascular disease risk factors. They were assigned for 3 months in 2 types of diets: low-fat diet, according to the American Heart Association guidelines, or 2 other types of Mediterranean diet. One was Mediterranean diet with virgin olive oil, and was with Mediterranean diet that have added 30 grams of nuts as well. And after 3 months, they found that when they compared the Mediterranean diet with olive oil versus the low-fat diet, we had very good results in all parameters, and we have even better results, I would say, at least for most of the parameters, when they added the nuts to the Mediterranean diet. So this is the difference in systolic blood pressure compared Mediterranean diet to low-fat diet, in diastolic blood pressure, in glucose level, in insulin, in HOMA, in cholesterol, increase in HDL. Here is a little difference. You see, we have a little higher increase when we had this type of diet compared to that. We have decrease in triglycerides and in cholesterol HDL ratio. And what was interesting is that when they saw the results again after a year, they had some very good results even after a year, because you had one presentation before about weight loss maintenance. And you do know that is a very big problem. In most studies, we see the results after 6 months. We don't follow our patients afterwards. And if we follow them, we don't find the same results after a year, after 2 years. And this is something we have to discuss and keep in mind. So, after 12 months in the PREDIMED study, they still found better results compared to the Mediterranean diet, olive oil, Mediterranean diet, compared to low-fat diet. Not in the first 2 parameters, in BMI and total cholesterol, but in LDL, triglycerides, systolic blood pressure, and diastolic blood pressure. So these four were still there, I would say, better results after a year. This is one of our studies that we try to look if there was a protective role of the Mediterranean diet on the prevalence of metabolic syndrome in a group that they were already obese. So what we were looking for is that if someone is overweight or obese and he follows the Mediterranean diet, is he, let's say, more a healthy obese individual compared with the others? I mean, what about the prevalence of metabolic syndrome? So what we did found, and it was a very interesting study, it was carried out in a group of colleagues in Thessaloniki. So what we figured out is that the adherence to the Mediterranean diet was associated with a low prevalence of metabolic syndrome in this group of overweight and obese individuals. What about weight loss? We said that everything is becoming better if we have a patient with a cardiometabolic disease and he loses weight. What about using the Mediterranean diet for losing weight? And this is a very good meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. And you can see in this meta-analysis that all the studies that have been included favors Mediterranean diet regarding weight loss. And what else about Mediterranean diet? Of course, because it is rich in olive oil, because it is rich in other antioxidants that are in fruits and vegetables, like vitamin C, probably some other polyphenols. Mediterranean diet, rich in virgin olive oils, is associated with higher levels of plasma antioxidant capacity. So in this PREDIMED study, again, these are results from the PREDIMED study, they measured the TAC, which is the plasma measurement for the antioxidant capacity. And plasma TAC was related to reduction also in body weight after 3 years of intervention in a high cardiovascular risk population with Mediterranean diet style rich in virgin olive oil. So these people, that they follow the Mediterranean diet for 3 years, one of the other, I would say very important results that we found in this study is that they have a reduced oxidative stress. And again, this is from the Attica study. It's another big study that they used in Greece. They used the Mediterranean diet. And you can see, it is related to inflammation. And you can see the low adherence group and the high adherence group, and you can see the difference between the two groups. This is the ones that they didn't follow the Mediterranean diet, this is the ones that they did, they followed the Mediterranean diet. So you can see differences in CRP, you can see differences in inflammation, in CRP, in interleukin 6, in white bloods, and in homocysteine. So it is, I would say, an anti-inflammatory diet. Can we have a conclusion from this for this dietary model? We can say that greater adherence to a Mediterranean diet is associated with a significant improvement in health status, and we can conclude from all the studies that we have a significant reduction in overall mortality, in mortality from cardiovascular diseases, incidence of all mortality from cancer. I didn't have time to talk a lot about cancer, but we have a decrease here as well. And of course, I didn't have time because that's not my subject, but I think it's also important. But that with this dietary model, we see a decrease in Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease, which is a very big problem nowadays in the elder population. So these results seem to be clinically relevant for public health, in particular for encouraging a Mediterranean-like dietary pattern for primary prevention of cardiometabolic diseases. I was not going to talk about it, but they gave me another 15 minutes, so I said I'm going to talk a little bit about the other dietary models. I was only going to talk about my Mediterranean diet, but there are so many other dietary models in the literature, and you can see that this is from the expert panel report, the guidelines in 2013, for the management of overweight and obesity in adults. It was published in Obesity in 2014, and you can see that all these diets are concerned as evidence-based diets to use for the prevention and treatment of cardiometabolic diseases. And you can see that we have diets like lacto-ovo-vegetarian, You will see diets with high protein, diets with 40% carbohydrates, which is zone-type diets. Some diets that have been proposed from different European associations: low carbohydrate, high protein, moderate carbohydrates, low glycemic load, low fat, moderate protein, high carbohydrates, low fat, high dairy and fiber, low fat, the Mediterranean diet that we already talked, and the AHA, the American Heart Association style, step 1. So, all these diets are there. There are some results in the literature. And of course, it's up to us to decide with our patients what type of diets we're going to use. There is a lot of discussion, and this also could be a seminar of a whole day or even a whole month, with the differences and, let's say, the pros and cons of all these diets. Can we sort of put them in some type of categories? I tried to do that, and I said that we are going to, if we talk about macronutrient distribution, we can talk about low or restricted carbohydrate diets, the low-fat diet, some high-protein diet, or the low glycemic load diets. And I love this slide. I'm sorry, it's a little bit, I don't know if you can see it on the top, it says high carbohydrate and low carbohydrate. This is something I like to show to my students, to show them how many different diets we have, that they start from the type of Atkins diets, which is a high protein diet, and if you go here and you say protein, carbohydrates and fat, it starts from a 30% protein and goes to the Ornish diet, it was only 18% protein. And we have diets that they start from 75% carbohydrate and go up low to 9%. And we have diets with 7% fat and 62% fat. And you will tell me, of course, what do we learn? We go to the nutrition school. We learn that the best diet is this diet, okay? Or this diet, which have something like 30% fat and 55% carbohydrates and 15% protein. But people have used different diets, as you can see, and you can find a lot of work in the literature. I told you with pros and cons. I could give you a lot of research work done in the literature and a lot of published work and RCTs as well. But I will give. I think it's good to see this study because this is a study that compares 3 diets. It's a work by Shai and his colleague in the New England Journal of Medicine, 2008. And it's a study that compared 3 diets: a low carbohydrate unrestricted diet. If we have a low carbohydrate diet, what do we have? A high? Low carbohydrate means high protein, okay, good. And we have a low carbohydrate diet, a low fat diet, that means high carbohydrate, correct? And then we have a Mediterranean diet. And they followed the subject over 2 years. So this is why it's a very good study, in my opinion. And what they found is that there was a significant decrease in body weight, in blood pressure, in waist circumference with all diets. So in general, we would say that all diets have some good results. But these were greater on the low carbohydrate and Mediterranean diet compared with a low fat diet after the 2 years. And I will show you in a little while what I mean. And we found some good improvements in lipid profiles and other biomarkers that finally, after the 2 years, because I told you it's not only the beginning what happens, it's what happens after 1 or 2 years, they were more favorable on the low carbohydrate and the Mediterranean diet. And you can see the results, and you can see that in the beginning, and you can find that in the literature, at about 6 months, we have the low carbohydrate diet with, let's say, the best results regarding body weight. So the low carbohydrate diet was minus 5.5 kilograms compared to the Mediterranean diet and the low fat diet. It was something like here, let's say 4.6 kilograms at this point. So, but what happened after this point, which is 12 months? let's go here then, it's 24 months. This is the low-fat diet, and these are the two diets, the Mediterranean diet and the low-carbohydrate diet here. So at 2 years, they had the same results. Why I'm saying that? Because I said we have all different diets in the literature. We can find the low-carbohydrate diet or the low-fat diet, and maybe we have better results in the short term using, for example, a high-protein diet, low-carbohydrate, high-protein diet model. But if we look at the literature, after 1 year or after 2 years, we have the better results with, for example, a model like Mediterranean diet. Because in this model, we have all the other benefits that I discussed before. We have to talk a little bit about the different diseases. And of course, we have what I've already said about cardioprotective diet. Applies to all the diseases, all the cardiometabolic diseases. If we follow this diet, we have a protection, hypertension, diabetes, dyslipidemia. But for each particular disease, we have some, let's say, small additions. That means that for hypertension, we have the DASH diet. The dietitians, I'm sure you're familiar with the DASH diet. And this diet showed that we have to reduce the systolic and diastolic blood pressure, and we make that by using this diet. That, in my opinion, if you look at the diet, it doesn't have so many differences compared to the Mediterranean diet, at least in the basic dietary principles. What about type 2 diabetes? 1 in 11 adults in 2015. We're expecting 1 in 10 adults in 2040. We have a lot of evidence in the literature that if we have a lifestyle intervention that incorporates diet and physical activity, this can prevent type 2 diabetes in high-risk individuals. And what are some, let's say, special characteristics of the diet? Of course, it must be a diet, as all the others, with low intake of saturated fats, high intake of unsaturated, monounsaturated fats, because they have a beneficial effect on the insulin sensitivity. Something that is special and we have to talk about when we're discussing diabetes is the glycemic index or the glycemic load. And there's some good work in the literature, evidence-based work, that says that we can recommend. Now we can recommend to our patients to choose foods that are low glycemic index. Recommendations, very similar for diabetes with the rest of the diseases I talked about, but some special points that we have to pay emphasis is that we have to eat the same time every day, at least with 1 hour of regular time, and divide carbohydrates into meals. And all the rest are the same. Finally, I'm going to spend another 5 minutes to talk to you about a new program we have run in Greece. It's just finished. We have the results. I'm going to show you some preliminary results, but we haven't published them yet. But I think it's a good idea to talk about this program because it's an intervention program for the prevention and treatment of cardiometabolic diseases using Mediterranean diet in Greek municipalities. So what we did, we went to the Ministry of Health and we said that we have all these problems in our country. We have obesity, high prevalence of obesity, cardiovascular diseases, we have high prevalence of diabetes and hypertension and dyslipidemia. So we want to have some money given to our group to have this program run in municipalities. And why municipalities? Because I'm sure you are all going to agree that we need all the community if we want to really have some results. So we decided to go to the community, to go to the municipalities, explain the problem, and ask for their help. So we ran this program in 50 Greek municipalities. It was a very big program. And what we did, we went to, as I said, to the municipalities, and we started a national program with nutrition education for adults and elders in Greece. And the program was based on the Mediterranean diet. And these were our objectives: the reduction of cardiometabolic diseases with Mediterranean diet, with the intervention, nutrition intervention, the improvement of level of health, the reduction in direct and indirect economic cost, and reduction of lost productivity. And these were our arguments for the Ministry of Health. And we had a number of work packages, we did all the literature review, and we had a lot of information material given to the municipality that they used and are keeping this information material, and they're going to use it every year, because the good thing about this program is already it's finished. The municipalities want to run by themselves the program because they were very happy about it. So we do have now some municipalities, not all of them, but a big number of municipalities that are using our material to continue the program. So what was the program? The program was first in each municipality for the health professionals. Why the health professionals? Because some of them, I wouldn't say they don't know much about nutrition, but I would say that it's quite helpful to talk about nutrition, especially to some doctors that are getting in touch every day with their patients, and there are some things it's better to clear regarding what they have to advise. So we had seminars for health professionals, doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, social workers, and sports scientists, and they were seminars from dietitians to the other health professionals. We found it very interesting. And it was one seminar organized in its municipality for the general public. We had a number of seminars for the health professionals, and we had seminar for the general public. So everybody was coming there and we were explaining what we are doing. Then the interesting part was our intervention programs. They were taking place in groups according to age. So we had young adults, middle-aged, and elders. And according to the disease, we started to say, you can go to any group you like. You have to choose. We have an obesity group. We have a type 2 diabetes group. We have a hyperlipidemia group. We have a hypertension and a cardiovascular disease group. It ended up that although we did divide them in groups, actually the diets at the end of the day were very similar, as you can understand, because most of patients didn't have one problem. They had more than one. And this is a very interesting part of the program, because the dietitians were coming back and discussed it. And we ended up seeing that the cardiometabolic or the cardioprotective Mediterranean diet. That means that, okay, maybe it was emphasis on salt intake for the hypertensive, or maybe it was emphasis on carbohydrate intake for the diabetes type 2. But in general, everybody was getting, let's say, similar information regarding their food intake. So the intervention lasted for 6 months. We had 6 meetings, at least 1 meeting every month, but most of them, they were so happy and interested that they were asking the dietitians to come more often, and I haven't analyzed the results yet, but I think some of them, they were there every week. So they like the program, they like the idea that they're getting information. Of course, it was free for them, for all the participants. So we also did a lot of publication, and I found that a lot of promotion, and dissemination, because we found it very, very interesting to disseminate our work, because more people were coming. We were having, talking in local electronic and printed media, magazines, writing in daily newspapers, giving interviews to journalists, etc., etc. So now it is very well known in Greece. We have the website and, of course, in social media. I will try to go very quickly. These are very preliminary results, and hoping to be able to publish them, I don't know if during the summer, but soon. But this is something I wanted to show you, because I'm very happy with the results, and it shows that such an intervention program using a dietary model, as we call it, or dietary pattern as the Mediterranean diet, can be very, very successful. Because you see, we had a very big number. Our intervention group was 5,343 people. And of course, we had a control group to compare it. And the control group were people that were giving them just very general information, but they were not participating in the intervention. Okay, they're just getting a pamphlet saying about healthy nutrition, once and then go. And these were as a control group, and we saw them after 6 months. So some very preliminary results. You can see the difference in body weight after 6 months in the intervention group, a significant, statistically significant difference compared to the control group, that they no difference, gain a little weight. You can see the difference in body weight, difference in BMI, in waist circumference, very big difference in waist circumference, in hip circumference, in WHR, and even in neck circumference. This is something that we started measuring. We can talk about it afterwards. We started measuring the last years, the neck circumference. And of course, in all biochemical parameters, total cholesterol, these are our intervention group before and after, and this is our control group before and after. So you can see we have statistical significant difference here. And here we have a slight increase in control group. We have a decrease in LDL, a slight increase in control group. We have an increase in HDL, a decrease in triglycerides, glucose, systolic and diastolic blood pressure. Our conclusion from this study is that preliminary data from this nutrition intervention study in the Greek municipalities suggests that a well-balanced Mediterranean type diet is able to reduce several metabolic risk factors in patients with cardiometabolic diseases. And I went through everything very, very quickly, but I hope that we'll have the time this afternoon after lunch to discuss according to your interest. And you can understand that it's a huge subject, and I'm very sorry if I couldn't cover everything, but I did my best, I tried. And finally, I want to tell you a little bit about our conference and invite you to participate, especially if you want, you can send some of your beautiful work as an abstract, and we are going to have, you can go to our website. This is the ECOG conference, the European Childhood Obesity Group Conference, that will be held in Thessaloniki from the 6th to the 8th October in Porto Palas. And you can go to ECOG website and find some information about the conference, and you are very welcome to come. Thessaloniki has a beautiful weather in October. And I'm looking forward to see some of you there. Thank you very much.
Very much. I wonder what your idea is about the problem with low salt intake, that people feel that, at least in some people, that activates the renin-angiotensin system. And indeed, total mortality is not necessarily lowest at a very low salt intake. So this is a complex debate, but I just wondered what your view is on that issue.
Yes, you're very right, and you raised a very important point. Actually, my answer is I don't know. And what I do believe is that, like everything else, we have to personalize the diet. Okay, we have some general guidelines, and we keep on saying these general guidelines for the general population, but I do believe that we have to see the patient in personal, see all the problems, all the health problems that the patient has, and then to advise to reduce the salt intake. So you see, we're very, very careful for the general population, and if you want my opinion, I don't believe that we should lower probably the extra salt we add to our foods, but we shouldn't really lower so much our sodium intake, which is something different than lowering our salt intake as extra salt we put in our foods.
Yeah. I have a question regarding the nut recommendation. Is it in whole nuts, or does that include nut butters or nut
Sorry,
spreads?
can you repeat that, please?
For the nut recommendation?
For the nut, yeah?
Yeah, for nuts. Does that include nut butters, or is it
No,
whole
only nuts.
Just
only
whole?
nuts. No, not butters.
I just wondered whether you had any thoughts on using the Mediterranean diet in Mediterranean countries versus outside of that, and whether maybe even particularly with adherence, whether when it becomes a more stark contrast to habitual diet, whether that might have differential effects.
We have an idea in IFA, the European Federation of the Association of Dietitians, of running a project next year, starting next year on this area. We are thinking of having that because there are a lot of discussion about using, as I said, I just made a hint using Mediterranean diet in countries where Mediterranean diet has not been part of their culture for years. And we are thinking about doing that, but we don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And also there's a discussion in IFAD about the difference between having a dietary pattern as a model and the cooking of the foods. You understand the difference? That means that maybe I say you use monosaturated fats, but you can use them from olive oil or from canola oil. Or you can have a dish made in a different way, cooked in a different way that is more acceptable by the local population.
Thank you. A lot of buts we always have to raise, right? I'm wondering, what is your opinion? Can we, in nutrition science, really recommend the 2 portions of fish per week in times of aquaculture, reduced fish population all over? This is one thing, and the other thing is I'm really wondering, because it might apply for other languages as well. In German, diet means Diät. So you are doing something for a certain period of time, and then you start eating normal again. And I really think that we should think about our wording and how we communicate a healthy, health-promoting diet. I use diet, but I think it's nutrition. And you mentioned very nicely the pattern. I would love to see it much more in the communication than this diet and then I eat normal again.
You're very right with the word diet. There are 2 words, diet and nutrition. And people believe, in my country as well, that when you're using the word diet, although in Greek, diet means eat. Okay? So people, even in Greece, they use the word diet and they say, I'm dieting. That means I'm doing a type of diet, usually trying to lose weight. This is the way they feel about it. Or I'm having a healthy nutrition, and that means, I'm following. And nowadays I see young people using both words, using the word diet when they want to say that I'm losing weight, and using the word nutrition when they want to say that, for example, I go to the gym and I want to be healthy, so I'm doing nutrition. So they have the 2 words. In Greek, there are 2 different words as well. Although diet means, I'm telling you, there is no difference in the Greek language, although they use the 2 words in different ways. So yes, I agree with you, we have to communicate that, and diet doesn't really mean a hypocaloric diet. Okay? Diet means good nutrition, healthy nutrition. I agree with you.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank all the speakers and the